The tones were dark and cold. They had always been dark and cold. Kira could not remember a time when the sun touched her wings. She was born underground, like her mother before her and her grandmother before that. 3 generations of her people had lived and died in these mines, digging precious metals for masters they had never chosen. The Mirith were small creatures. Their bodies were thin and delicate, covered in soft shells that shimmered like oil on water. They had 4 arms and 2 legs, and wings that had once carried them through the skies of their home world. But that was long ago. Now their wings were weak from years without flight. Some of the younger ones could not fly at all. Kira walked through the narrow passage toward the Elder's chamber. Her feet made no sound on the stone floor. Around her, she could hear the coughing of the sick and the crying of hungry children. The food rations had been cut again. The Dragon did not care if the workers starved, as long as they met their quotas. Elder Tiva sat alone in the small cave she called home. She was the oldest Mirith in the colony. Her shell faded to a dull gray. Her wings nothing more than thin membranes that hung from her back like old cloth. But her eyes were still sharp, and her mind was still clear. "You wanted to see me, Elder?" Kira asked. Tiva looked up slowly. "Sit, child. I have something to tell you." Kira sat on the cold ground and waited. The Elder was silent for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. "My grandmother told me stories," Tiva began. "Stories from before the Dragon came. She spoke of many things, but one story stayed with me all these years. A story about a species from a small blue world on the far edge of the galaxy." "What species?" Kira asked. "They called themselves humans." Tiva's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Dragon tried to conquer them once, long before they came to our world. They thought the humans would be easy prey. They were wrong." Kira leaned forward. She had never heard this story before. "The humans fought back," Tiva continued. "They had no great ships, no powerful weapons. But they would not surrender. They would not break. The Dragon lost more soldiers trying to take that one small world than they had lost in 100 other conquests. In the end, they gave up and left the humans alone." "Why are you telling me this?" Kira asked. Tiva reached under his sleeping mat and pulled out a small device. It was old and covered in dust, but Kira recognized it immediately. A communication transmitter. "I have kept this hidden for 40 years, Tiva said. "I took it from a crashed Dragon ship when I was young. I never had the courage to use it. But now our people are dying. The young ones grow weaker every day. If we do not do something, there will be no Mirith left within a generation." She pressed the transmitter into Kira's hands. "Find a way to send a message," Tiva said. "Send it to the humans. Beg them for help. They are the only ones who ever made the Dragon afraid." Kira looked at the device in her hands. It was a foolish hope. The humans were far away, if they even existed at all. And even if the message reached them, why would they come? The Mirith had nothing to offer. They were just slaves in a forgotten mine on a worthless moon. But what other choice did they have? It took Kira 3 weeks to repair the transmitter. She worked in secret, stealing parts from broken mining equipment and hiding in abandoned tunnels. When it was finally ready, she climbed to the highest point she could reach, a small crack in the ceiling that let in a sliver of starlight. She pressed the button and spoke into the device. "This is a message to any humans who can hear me. My name is Kira. I am a Mirith. My people have been slaves of the Dragon for 3 generations. We are dying. Our children are starving. We have no weapons and no ships. We cannot fight. We cannot run. We can only ask for help. Please, if the stories about your kind are true, please come. We have nothing to give you in return. We can only offer our gratitude. Please help us." She sent the message again and again, every night for 2 weeks. Then the transmitter finally broke, and she could send no more. Kira told no one what she had done. She did not want to give her people false hope. Far across the galaxy, a cargo ship called the Steadfast drifted through empty space. Its captain, a woman named Yuna, sat in the pilot's chair and watched the stars. She was 34 years old, with black hair cut short and hands rough from years of hard work. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Captain," said Taiho, the engineer, from his station below deck. "We are picking up something strange. A repeating signal. Very weak, very old. It has been bouncing around for weeks. What does it say?" Yuna asked. There was a pause. Then Taiho played the message. Kira's voice filled the ship, small and desperate and full of pain. Yuna listened without moving. When the message ended, she sat in silence for a long time. "Taiho," she finally said, "get Ji-Wan and Doan. We need to talk." An hour later, the 4 crew members sat together in the ship's small common room. They had all heard the message. They all knew what it would mean to respond. "It is not our fight," said Dohan, the security officer. He was a large man with a scar across his jaw. "We are 4 people on one cargo ship." "She's right about the Dragon," said Ji-Wan, the medic. She was small and quiet, but her eyes were fierce. "They are monsters. I have seen what they do to the species they conquer. If we go, we might die," Taiho said simply. Yuna looked at each of them in turn. "Yes, we might die. But that girl sent a message into the void, hoping someone would hear, hoping someone would care. What kind of people would we be if we just flew away?" The vote was quick. 4 hands raised. Yuna smiled and turned back to the controls. "Taiho, plot a course for Vilar 7. The Steadfast changed direction and flew toward a moon where 4,000 Mirith waited in the darkness, not knowing that help was finally on its way. And on that same moon, the Dragon commander received a report. Someone had been sending signals into space. Someone was going to pay for that mistake. The hunt had begun. The Steadfast dropped out of hyperspace behind a large asteroid, hidden from the sensors of Vilar 7. Yuna studied the moon through the ship's window. It was an ugly place. Gray rocks stretched across the surface like scars. Dark clouds of gas rose from cracks in the ground. In the distance, she could see the lights of the Dragon mining compound, bright and cold against the darkness. "I count at least 50 Dragon soldiers," said Dawn, looking at the scanner. "Plus support staff. Heavy weapons on the perimeter. They are not expecting trouble, but they are ready for it." "What about the Mirith?" Yuna asked. "Underground. The tunnels go deep. Thousands of life signs that they are weak. Many of them are sick." Yuna felt her jaw tighten. She had seen suffering before. She had grown up on a colony world where life was hard and death came easy. But there was something about this situation that made her blood burn. These creatures had done nothing wrong. They were simply born on a world that the Dragon wanted. "I am going down alone," she said. The others started to argue, but she raised her hand. "If we all go, we risk the ship. If something happens to me, you 3 can still help. Taiho, keep the engines warm. Dohan, watch the Dragon patrols. Ji-Wan, prepare the medical bay. We might have patients soon." She put on her old jacket, checked her small pistol, and walked to the airlock. "Yuna," Ji-Wan called after her. "Be careful." Yuna smiled. "I always am." She was not. The landing was rough. Yuna brought the small shuttle down in a canyon far from the Dragon compound, hiding it under a rock overhang. She walked 3 hours through the cold night, following the coordinates where the signal had come from. The ground was sharp and uneven. The air was thin and smelled like metal. She found the tunnel entrance just before dawn. It was a small crack in the side of a hill, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. She turned on her flashlight and went inside. The tunnel went down and down and down. The walls were smooth, worn by generations of small hands. Kira could hear sounds in the darkness, whispers, footsteps, the clicking of shells against stone. Then she turned a corner and stopped. 100 mirrors stood before her. They were smaller than she expected, barely reaching her waist. Their eyes were large and reflected her flashlight like mirrors. Their wings hung limp and useless. They held tools as weapons, mining picks and metal rods, raised and ready. They were terrified. Yuna slowly put down her flashlight. She raised her empty hands. "My name is Yuna," she said. Her voice was calm and soft. "I heard your message. I came to help." The Mirith did not move. They stared at her like she was a ghost, a creature from a dream. Some of them began to shake. One small child started to cry. Then the crowd parted, and Kira stepped forward. She was young, Yuna could tell. Her shell was still bright, her wings still had some color. But her eyes were old. They had seen too much. "You are human?" Kira asked. Her voice trembled. "Yes. You came alone?" "My crew is waiting in orbit. 4 of us total." Kira looked at her for a long moment. Then her face changed. It was not anger. It was not relief. It was something else entirely. Disappointment. 4? She whispered. "We sent our message across the galaxy. We begged for salvation. And they sent 4 people in a cargo ship?" Yuna did not look away. "Yes," she said. 4 people. 1 ship. That is what we have. I am sorry it is not more. Sorry." Kira's voice rose. "The Dragon have 50 soldiers here. They have weapons that can destroy mountains. They have ships that can chase us across the stars. And you bring 4 people?" "Yes. Why?" Kira demanded. "Why even come? What can 4 humans do against all of that?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. She looked around at the Mirith, at their thin bodies and frightened eyes and broken wings. She thought about the message she had heard, the desperation in the young voice, the plea sent into the void. "I do not know," she admitted. "I do not know if we can save you. I do not know if we will survive the night. But I know one thing. When you sent that message, you were hoping someone would answer. Someone did. I am here. That has to count for something." Kira stared at her. The other Mirith watched in silence. Then an old voice spoke from the back of the crowd. "Let her through." The Mirith parted again, and Elder Tiva walked forward. She was leaning on a young helper, her steps slow and painful. But when she reached Yuna, she stood straight and looked up at the human with clear eyes. "You are not what I expected," Tiva said. "What did you expect?" "An army. A fleet. Warriors in shining armor." Yuna smiled sadly. "I am just a cargo captain. But I am here." Tiva nodded slowly. "My grandmother told me about humans. She said you were dangerous because you never gave up. She said you were kind because you remembered your own suffering. Is this true?" Yuna thought about her answer. "Humans have a difficult history," she said. "Long ago, we did terrible things to each other. We enslaved our own kind. We fought wars over nothing. We destroyed our own world with greed and hate." She paused. "But we learned. Slowly, painfully, we learned. We learned that no one is truly free until everyone is free. That lesson cost us millions of lives and thousands of years. But we learned it." She looked around the cave at the Mirith. "When I heard your message, I could have ignored it. I could have told myself it was not my problem. But I could not, because I know what it feels like to be forgotten, to be abandoned, to cry for help and hear only silence." Her voice grew firm. I will not be that silence for you. Elder Tiva was quiet for a long time. Then she reached out and took Yuna's hand in her small, cold fingers. Then we will trust you, she said. Not because we believe you can win, but because you came. Suddenly, Dohan's voice crackled through Yuna's communicator. Captain, we have a problem. Dragon Patrol found the shuttle. They know someone is here. They are sending soldiers into the tunnels. Yuna's heart went cold. She looked at the thousands of Mirith around her, at their hopeful, frightened faces. How long do we have? She asked. Maybe 2 hours. Maybe less. Kira grabbed Yuna's arm. What do we do? Yuna took a deep breath. She thought of Taiho and Jiwan and Dohan waiting in the ship above. She thought of the Dragon soldiers coming with their weapons and their cruelty. She thought of 4,000 souls who had no one else to turn to. Get everyone ready to move, she said. We are getting you out of here. All of you. That is impossible, Kira said. Yuna smiled, and for a moment, her eyes shone with something fierce and unbreakable. Maybe, but impossible is what humans do best. Taiho arrived first. He climbed down through a ventilation shaft that Kira had shown them, carrying a bag full of tools and equipment. He was a thin man with gentle eyes and hands that never stopped moving. Behind him came Jaiwan, the medic, with 2 heavy cases of medical supplies on her back. Last came Dawn, silent and watchful, his weapon ready. The 4 humans stood together in the center of the main cave. Around them, 4,000 Mirith watched and waited. So, Taiho said, looking around, we need to move all of these people to tunnels full of Dragon soldiers, to a ship that can carry maybe 200 at most. Yes, Yuna said, and we have less than 2 hours before the Dragon find us. Yes, Taiho rubbed his face with both hands. I was hoping I heard wrong. What about calling for help? Jiwan asked. Other human ships? The Galactic Council? Yuna shook her head. The nearest human colony is 3 weeks away. The Council does not interfere in Dragon territory. We are on our own. Dawn walked to the edge of the cave and looked down the tunnel that led toward the surface. His face was calm, but his hand rested on his weapon. The Dragon will not kill everyone, he said quietly. They need workers. They will make examples of some and put the rest back in chains. That is how they operate. That is not acceptable, Yuna said. I did not say it was. I am simply telling you what we face. Elder Tiva walked forward. She had been listening in silence, but now she spoke. There is another way out of these tunnels. A path we have kept secret from the Dragon for many years. It leads to the far side of the moon, to a place where ships used to land before the mining compound was built. Yuna's eyes lit up. How far? 6 hours of walking. Maybe more for the sick and the young. Can the ship land there? Yuna asked Taiho. The engineer pulled out a small device and studied the moon's surface. After a moment, he nodded. The terrain is rough, but I can make it work. But Yuna, even if we get everyone there, the ship cannot carry 4,000 people. We do not have enough air. We do not have enough food. We do not have enough space. How many trips would it take? Taiho did the math in his head. At least 20. That would take days. The Dragon would find us long before we finished. Silence fell over the cave. The Mirith looked at each other with hollow eyes. For a moment, it seemed like hope had died. Then Jiwan spoke up. What if we do not go to a human colony? What if we go somewhere closer? Everyone looked at her. The neutral zone, she said. It is only 8 hours from here. There are space stations there that accept refugees. If we can get the Mirith to the zone, they will be safe. The Dragon cannot touch them there. 8 hours in a ship packed with 4,000 people, Taiho said. Half of them sick, No food, limited air. He shook his head. People will die. Some might, Jiwan admitted. Her voice was soft but steady, but not all. And those who survive will be free. Yuna looked at Elder Tiva. It is your people. It is your choice. The old Mirith was quiet for a long moment. She looked around at her people, at the children hiding behind their parents, at the sick lying on the ground, at the workers who had spent their whole lives in darkness. We have been dying slowly for 3 generations, she finally said. At least this way, we die reaching for something better. She turned to face the crowd and raised her voice. Gather everything you can carry. We leave within the hour. The cave erupted into motion. Families began packing their few belongings. The healthy helped the sick to their feet. Mothers picked up their children. Old ones said goodbye to the caves that had been their prison and their home. While the Mirith prepared, the 4 humans gathered in a corner to make their own plans. The Dragon will follow, Dahum said. They will send soldiers into the tunnels as soon as they realize what is happening. Then we need to slow them down, Yuna replied. Buy time for the evacuation. Taiho pulled up a map of the mine on his device. The mining compound sits on top of large methane deposits. If we cause an explosion at the right point, it would block the main tunnels and create a distraction that would pull their forces away. An explosion big enough to block the tunnels would be big enough to kill whoever sets it off, Dahum said calmly. Taiho nodded. Yes, it would. I will do it, Doan said immediately. No, Yuna said. I am the logical choice. I am the best fighter. I can get in, set the charge, and hold off the Dragon longer than anyone else. I said no. Doan met her eyes. Yuna, 4,000 lives against 1. The math is simple. The math is never simple when it is someone you care about. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Doan looked away. Fine. We will figure something else out. Across the cave, Jiwan had set up a small medical station. Mirith lined up before her, coughing and shaking, their shells cracked and their wings torn. She worked without rest, treating infections, binding wounds, giving what medicine she had. A young Mirith watched her work. It was Kira. You cannot save them all, Kira said quietly. No, Jiwan agreed, but I can save some. And for those some, it will make all the difference. Why do you care so much? We are strangers to you. We are not even the same species. Jiwan paused and looked at the young Mirith. When I was a child, my village was destroyed by raiders. Everyone I loved was killed. I survived because a stranger found me hiding in the ruins and carried me to safety. He did not know me. He owed me nothing, but he saved me anyway. She returned to her work. I became a doctor so I could be that stranger for someone else. Kira was silent for a long moment. Then she picked up a bandage and began helping. An hour later, the evacuation began. 4,000 Mirith moved through the secret tunnels, guided by Kira and the other scouts who knew the way. Yuna walked at the front. Taiho was already flying the ship to the landing zone. Jiwan moved through the crowd, checking on the sick. And Doan walked at the very back, watching the darkness behind them. They had been walking for 2 hours when the first explosion shook the tunnels. The Dragon had found the main caves. They were coming. Yuna quickened her pace and spoke into her communicator. Taiho, how far are you? 3 hours. Maybe less if I push the engines. Push them. Behind them, they could hear shouting. The sound of weapons firing. The Dragon were in the tunnels now, hunting. Doan stopped walking. He looked at Yuna and smiled. Keep moving, he said. I will slow them down. Doan, go. He turned and walked back into the darkness, alone. Yuna wanted to call after him. She wanted to order him to come back. But she looked at the 4,000 Mirith around her, at the children and the sick and the old, and she knew she could not. She turned and kept walking. Behind her, the sound of gunfire began. Dawn had found the enemy, and the enemy had found something they had never expected: a human who would not run. The tunnels echoed with the sound of battle. Dawn stood alone in a narrow passage where the ceiling was low and the walls were close together. The dragon could only come at him two at a time. That was his advantage. That was the only thing keeping 4,000 Mirith alive. The first soldiers came fast, confident that one human would be easy prey. They were wrong. Doan moved like water. His weapon spoke once, twice, 3 times. 3 dragon fell. The next wave came, and he met them with his hands when his ammunition ran low. He had trained for this his whole life. He had always known he would die in battle. He just never knew it would be for people he had only met hours before. But that did not matter. They were people. They needed help. That was enough. Far ahead in the tunnels, Yuna heard the gunfire growing distant. She wanted to turn back. She wanted to fight beside her friend. But she had 4,000 lives depending on her, and she could not let them down. "Keep moving," she called to the Mirith. "Do not stop. Do not look back." The tunnels twisted and turned. Some passages were wide enough for groups to walk together. Others were so narrow they had to go single file. Kira led the way, her knowledge of the secret paths keeping them ahead of the dragon patrols. Elder Tiva walked near the front, leaning on a young helper. Her breathing was heavy, and her steps were slow. She had not walked this far in many years. "You should rest," Yuna said, falling back to walk beside her. "There is no time for rest," Tiva replied. "I have waited my whole life for this moment. I will not stop now." An hour passed, then another. The sounds of battle behind them faded, then grew louder again. Dalhan was falling back, drawing the dragon deeper into the maze of tunnels, buying precious minutes with every step. Then disaster struck. The tunnel ahead was blocked. A rockfall had collapsed the passage, filling it with broken stone and dust. The Mirith stopped, staring at the wall of rubble in despair. "Is there another way?" Yuna asked Kira. The young Mirith checked her mental map. "Yes, but it adds 2 hours to our journey." "We do not have 2 hours." Yuna grabbed a rock and started pulling. "Then we make a path through this one." The Mirith stared at her. "Move," Yuna said. "Everyone who can lift, start lifting. We clear this passage or we die here." They worked. Human and Mirith together, pulling stones from the pile, passing them back down the line, digging with their bare hands. Yuna's fingers bled. Her back screamed with pain. But she did not stop. Beside her, Kira worked just as hard. Their eyes met once, and Kira nodded. No words were needed. 20 minutes later, they broke through. The passage beyond was open. "Go!" Yuna shouted. "Go now." The Mirith poured through the gap, flowing like a river toward freedom. Yuna stood at the opening, counting heads, making sure no one was left behind. Jiwan appeared at her side, carrying a small Mirith child. The child was barely breathing, its shell cracked from illness. "This one will not make it," Jiwan said quietly. Yuna looked at the child. It was so small, so fragile, like a baby bird that had fallen from its nest. "Do what you can," she said. Jiwan nodded and moved on. She had been working without rest for hours, treating the sick as they walked, giving her own food and water to those who needed it more. Her face was gray with exhaustion, but her hands were steady. They walked for another hour. The tunnels began to slope upward. Fresh air drifted down from somewhere above. They were getting close. Then Taihao's voice crackled through the communicator. "I can see the landing zone. I'm coming down now. You have maybe 30 minutes before the dragon realize where you are going. We will be there Yuna said. She looked back down the tunnel. The sounds of fighting had stopped. She did not know what that meant. She did not want to know. The Mirith emerged from the tunnels just as the sun was rising. It was the first time many of them had seen sunlight in their entire lives. They stopped and stared at the sky, at the clouds of gas swirling around the planet above, at the stars fading in the morning light. Some of them cried. Some of them laughed. Some fell to their knees and could not stand again. Yuna wanted to give them time. She wanted to let them enjoy this moment. But there was no time. "The ship is coming," she shouted. Everyone moved to the landing zone. They gathered on a flat stretch of rock just as the Steadfast descended from the sky. The ship was small and old, its hull covered in patches and repairs. It had never been beautiful, but to the Mirith, it looked like salvation. The loading ramp opened and Taiho appeared in the doorway. His arm was bandaged, burned from pushing the engines too hard. But he was smiling. "Room for a few thousand guests?" he called. The Mirith began to board. They packed themselves into every available space. The cargo hold, the corridors, the common room, the engine bay. They sat on the floor, stood against the walls, held children on their laps. The ship was not meant for this many people. It would be dangerous. It might not work. But they did not care. Elder Tiva was one of the last to board. She stopped at the bottom of the ramp and looked back at the tunnels. "He is not coming," she said quietly. Yuna followed her gaze. The tunnel entrance was dark and empty. "We have to go," Taiho said from inside. "The Dragon are mobilizing. We have minutes at most." Yuna did not move. She kept staring at the tunnel, waiting, hoping. Then Kira grabbed her arm. "He bought us this chance," the young Mirith said. "Do not waste it." Yuna closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were hard as stone. "Close the ramp," she said. The metal doors began to slide shut. Yuna turned away from the tunnel. She could not watch any more. Then she heard Jiwan gasp. Yuna spun around. A figure was emerging from the tunnel. He was walking slowly, dragging one leg. His armor was shattered. His weapon was gone. Blood covered his face and his chest and his hands. But he was walking. "Doan," Yuna breathed. She ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life. She reached him just as he started to fall and caught him in her arms. "I told you to go," he said. His voice was weak, barely a whisper. "I do not follow orders very well," she replied. Together, Jiwan helping on one side and Yuna on the other, they carried him onto the ship. The ramp closed behind them. The engines roared, and the Steadfast lifted off from Valor 7, carrying 4,000 Mirith and 4 battered humans into the sky. Below them, the Dragon commander watched the ship disappear into the clouds. His face was twisted with rage. "Track them," he ordered. "Find where they go. I want that ship destroyed." But by the time his soldiers reached their own ships, the Steadfast was already gone. 8 hours. That was all they needed. 8 hours to freedom. The Steadfast flew through the darkness of space. Inside, 4,000 Mirith were packed so tightly they could barely breathe. The air was thin. The temperature was rising. Some of the sick were getting worse. But they were free. Yuna sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the stars ahead. Behind her, she could hear Jiwan moving through the ship, checking on patients, giving comfort where she could. Taiho was in the engine room, holding the ship together with wire and prayers. And Dohan was in the medical bay, unconscious but alive, his wounds bandaged and his body slowly healing. Kira squeezed into the cockpit and sat on the floor beside Yuna's chair. "How much longer?" she asked. 6 more hours. Will everyone survive?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. Some might not. We do not have enough medicine. We do not have enough food. But most will make it. Kira nodded. She had grown up in the mines, surrounded by death. The idea that most of her people would survive seemed like a miracle. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why did you come?" "The truth. Not the speech you gave Elder Tiva. The real reason." Yuna thought about the question. She thought about her life on the cargo ship, moving from port to port, carrying goods that did not matter to people she would never see again. She thought about the emptiness she had felt before the message arrived. "I was drifting," she finally said. "I had a ship and a crew, but I did not have a purpose. When I heard your voice, calling out into the darkness, asking for help," she paused. "I realized that I had been waiting my whole life to hear that call. I just did not know it until it came." Kira was silent for a long time. "My grandmother used to say that the universe sends us the help we need, even when we do not deserve it," she said. "I never believed her. Now I think maybe she was right." The hours passed. The ship shook and groaned. The Mirith prayed and sang and held each other in the darkness. And slowly, impossibly, the neutral zone grew closer. They reached the border just as the Steadfast's engines began to fail. Taiho's voice came over the communicator. "We have maybe 20 minutes of power left. After that, we are dead in space." Yuna pushed the ship harder. The hull screamed. Alarms went off across every panel. Then she saw it. A space station. Large and bright, covered in lights that blinked in the darkness like stars. The symbol of the Refugee Council was painted on its side. "This is the Steadfast," Yuna spoke into the communication system. "We have 4,000 Mirith refugees. We need immediate assistance." There was a pause. Then a voice came back. "Steadfast, this is Station Harmony. We see you. Medical teams are standing by. Welcome to the neutral zone." The Mirith did not understand the words, but they understood the tone. They understood that they were safe. And they began to cry. The landing was rough. The Steadfast came down hard, its engines dying as it touched the station's deck. Emergency teams rushed forward. Medics carried out the sick. Workers brought food and water. And for the first time in 3 generations, the Mirith walked out into a world where no one wanted to hurt them. Elder Tiva was one of the last to leave the ship. She stood at the top of the ramp and looked out at the station, at the people rushing to help, at the Mirith children playing on solid ground. Yuna stood beside her. "Thank you," Tiva said. "That word is not enough, but it is all I have." "It is enough," Yuna replied. Tiva looked at her with old, wise eyes. "What will you do now?" Yuna had not thought about it. She had been so focused on getting here that she had not considered what came after. "I do not know," she admitted. "Fix the ship. Find a new job. Go back to drifting, I suppose." Tiva reached out and took her hand. "Or," she said, "you could stay. Help us build a new home. We have nothing to offer you except our friendship. But we offer it freely for as long as you want it." Yuna looked at the old Mirith. She looked at the station, at the new beginning unfolding before her. "I will think about it," she said. 1 year later, a new colony stood on a small green moon in the neutral zone. The Mirith had named it Hope. It was a simple place, with small houses and fields and schools. But it was theirs. It was free. Yuna still had her ship. She still flew between worlds, carrying cargo and passengers. But she always came back to Hope. It was her home now, as much as it was theirs. Taiho had fallen in love with a Mirith engineer. Together, they designed new ships that could fly faster and farther than anything the Mirith had ever seen. Jiwon had opened a clinic. She trained young Mirith in medicine. passing on the knowledge that had saved so many lives. And Doan, once he healed, had become a teacher. He taught the young ones how to defend themselves, how to fight, how to stand up for what they believed in. Kira had grown into something remarkable. She had learned the human language. She had studied their history. And when the Galactic Council finally agreed to hear the Mirith's case, she was chosen to speak. She stood before the council chamber, a small figure surrounded by representatives from 100 different worlds. The Dragon ambassador was there, furious and shouting about stolen property and runaway slaves. Kira waited until he finished. Then she spoke. 1 year ago, my people were dying. We had been slaves for 3 generations. We had no hope, no future, no reason to believe tomorrow would be any different from yesterday. She paused and looked around the chamber. Then we sent a message into the void, a desperate call for help. We did not expect anyone to answer. Why would they? We had nothing to offer. We were just slaves on a forgotten moon. Our voice grew stronger, but someone answered. 4 humans in a cargo ship. They heard our call, and they came. They did not ask what we could give them. They did not demand payment or promises. They simply came. She looked at the Dragon ambassador. You ask why your property was stolen, but we were never property. We were people. We had hopes and dreams and children. We had stories and songs and prayers. We had lives that mattered, even if you refused to see it. She turned back to the council. The humans saw it. They saw us, and they risked everything to help us. That is why I stand before you today. Not because we deserve special treatment. Not because we are better than anyone else. But because someone believed we were worth saving. Her eyes found Yuna in the gallery above. When I asked the captain why she came, she told me something I will never forget. She said that humans learned a painful lesson long ago. They learned that no one is truly free until everyone is free. Kira let the words hang in the air. My people are free now. We are building a new home on a world we chose for ourselves. We are raising children who will never know the darkness of the mines. And every night, we look up at the stars and remember the 4 humans who answered our call. She took a breath. The Dragon want us back. They say we belong to them, but we do not. We belong to ourselves, and we will never go back. The chamber was silent. Then, one by one, the representatives began to vote. The Dragon lost. The Mirith were declared free. On the green moon of hope, the celebration lasted 3 days. There was singing and dancing and feasting. Children played games they had never played before. Old ones told stories of the escape, of the tunnels, of the night of fire. And in the center of the colony, a statue was unveiled. It showed 4 humans standing together. Yuna at the front, her face determined. Taiho beside her, tools in his hands. Jiwan behind him, gentle and strong. And Doan at the back, watching over them all. At the base of the statue, words were carved in both Korean and Mirith script. They answered our call. Yuna stood before the statue, surrounded by the people she had saved. Kira was beside her. Taiho and Jiwan were nearby. And Dohan, walking with a cane now but walking on his own, stood at her shoulder. We did a good thing, Dohan said quietly. Yuna nodded. Yes, we did. She looked out at the colony, at the houses and the fields and the children playing in the sunlight. She thought about the message that had started everything, the desperate voice calling out into the darkness. Sometimes the universe sends help. Sometimes that help is 4 people in a cargo ship who refuse to look away. And sometimes that is enough to change everything.